This is The Balanced Dilemma. We tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma, managing life, work, family, and self. I'm Maura Carlin.
And I'm Christy Derrico. At The Balanced Dilemma, we speak with women and men to hear their balanced stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents, and partners, telling us what we really want to know. How the heck did they manage that? And can you have it all and all at the same time?
What makes a modern husband? Is it different from any other type of husband? Brian Page founded the website, modernhusbands.com, and he's joining us to tell us what it's all about, as well as sharing his shift to lead parent years into his family's journey. Married with 3 children, Brian spent over 15 years as a personal and finance economic educator before relocating to Atlanta, Georgia for his wife's career. Modern Husbands focuses on sharing ideas about managing money and the home as a team. Welcome to The Balanced Dilemma, Brian.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your personal story, because it's fair to say perhaps you weren't always a modern husband. So tell us about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm from a small town in Ohio, a rural area where most of us, kind of fall into traditional norms where you're really focused on just being a financial provider and a protector. And for much of our marriage, I think I fell into that category where I was working all the time. I worked 60 to 80 hours a week for most of our marriage. And my wife, who I married up, she's a heck of a lot smarter than me too. She is ambitious in her career. And so I gave up my career and moved to support hers in Atlanta. And ultimately, we decided that what was best for our family, because at the time, what I ended up doing was growing into another big career, was that we didn't need 2 people that were focused on their careers. We needed one of us at least to be the flexible one at home, to be, as we like to call it, and a friend of mine likes to call it, the gardener at home. So my spouse, my wife, could be the rose and bloom in her career. And so I decided to do just that. And this all started, Modern Husbands, with a Google search of how to be a great husband, because I knew I needed to take a different perspective to provide the types of support needed in our home than what I was doing before when I was focused primarily on my career. And fast forward a couple and 2-3 years later, and Modern Husbands is alive and well, and feel like it's pretty representative of most American households, which are full of busy dual career couples like my wife and myself and our 3 kids and our 4 cats.
Brian, let me take you back to, when you're discussing that you're going to become the gardener, what were the discussions or negotiations like leading up to that discussion or decision?
I feel like that when you're focused on your family, and fortunately we were in a financial position to be able to make that decision, and knowing that what she was trying to accomplish and is accomplishing in her career was such a priority, it made it relatively easy, because ultimately my goal is to make my wife and my family happy. And I was able to, kind of step outside of the traditional norm of believing that money and masculinity were married, knowing that I needed to provide in more ways than that to make sure that our family was happy. And, recognizing that by doing so, I alleviated stress at home. I put my wife in a position where it was easier for her to thrive in her career. The decision to do so was, I think, easier than it has been for others. And I think maybe part of that is I felt like I'd already accomplished a lot of the things that I wanted to accomplish in my own career. I would like to think this is something that I could start a marriage by doing. I know that there's a lot of men who do. And for me, also we've always approached marriage more as kind of like a team. It just so happened that up until that point, my focus was really strictly, being a financial provider and being there for my kids and her. But she was really the one that made the house run.
I always called that, at least in my family, I was the CEO. My husband was in charge of revenue generation, but I was in charge of everything else. And then I've heard other people describe it that way. What kind of reaction did you get from family, friends, the outside world? And were there pressures there that made it more comfortable or less comfortable?
I was surprised by the overwhelming support. I surprised, and also it opened my eyes to, I think, the lack of support a lot of high achieving women in the workforce are getting, at least conscious support at home. I learned in this journey that women predominantly handle so much more of what it takes to manage a home, even when they're working just as many hours, if not more, than their husbands outside of the home, even if they're earning more financially. And that's a frustration for many women. And I thankfully have received a lot of support for just outwardly expressing, I think, the need for dudes to kind of look at the way marriage operates in the 21st century differently, right? I mean, it's not the 1950s and 60s. There's absolutely nothing wrong with couples who do make the decision to have one person who is the financial provider, and perhaps the mother is the homemaker and stays home. There's nothing wrong with that if that's the decision they want to make, but that's just not what's the norm anymore. And I think what's happened is that over decades of seeing progress in more gender equity in the workforce, the gender pay gap continuing to close, that at the same time, we're not seeing that same amount of progress necessarily inside the home, because it wasn't modeled for all of us. And the home has to be designed as a system that operates almost as its own company. And if you've never been taught how to do that, if you've never been modeled how to do that, then it's tough. There's a lot of complexities that play into the assumptions people make in their relationship, and you have to work through those as a couple to do it. And as I've worked through those and shared those learnings with the broader community, people have been really supportive.
So
family, friends, professionals.
I have a few burning questions. I was so excited to talk to you. So you've seen the show Undercover Boss, where the boss goes in and does the job of some of his employees. You're like undercover boss, right? So was there anything that you learned in this shift in your designated roles that you said, wow, I didn't realize that that's how it was?
Yeah, the mental load. The mental load of managing a home. Like, I cannot stress that enough. And I want to be clear about how we approach this. My wife is a member of like different lean-in organizations, right? And I guess the kind of the message there is to subtly lean in your career as women. And what my experience has been is that men simply need to step in at home. They need to assert themselves. They need to simply say, like I did, like, I got it. I'm going to focus on doing this first. We're going to have a career, but I'm going to focus on this so you can blossom in your career. And that was a big turning point. But what I quickly learned was that it is like running a business. Like, you have this list in your head that you go through every single day. It's like this checklist. But the list isn't like, it's not like this text list that doesn't have emotions tied to it, right? There's emotional labor that goes with it. And
stress and worry.
And anticipating things that you can't possibly anticipate, and yet you are. I mean, I don't know if it happens in your house, but knowing where somebody's keys are, even though you have no
Yes.
idea where their keys are.
Yes, but this
You know what I'm
Absolutely.
talking about.
this raises a good point. But I also wonder, were there things that you took on that you discovered that you did it differently, and that was to the benefit? Because women, which something we've discussed here, we often gatekeep. Okay, so meaning, for
Right.
example, the laundry needs to be done this way. We have to use
Yeah.
OxyClean with this load. And guess what? The laundry gets pretty clean if you forget the OxyClean, here and there. Is there any, and Maura's laughing at me right now, really. I don't appreciate it, Maura. Was there anything that you found that you did differently that, you know what, it made things a little better in the household, less stressful, less worry? Oh, you don't use OxyClean, I can just tell.
I'm going to answer this question very carefully and delicately. Let's see. Okay, I'll share something where I'll answer that question directly, but then I'm going to quickly follow it up with some practical common sense of how to take what your wife has done for years and just not try to reinvent the wheel. So I guess I can say this comfortably because my wife openly shares this. She does not enjoy cooking. She's not especially good at cooking. I love to cook. I love to smoke food. I love to barbecue. I love to meal plan. My brother's the same way. And so I think like the family would tell you that's probably been something that has been done more kind of like efficiently, because like when you cook, and I'm not talking about throwing a frozen pizza in the oven, but you have to like plan ahead, right? Like when you're
Right.
getting your vegetables so they don't go bad, when you get your seafood so it doesn't go bad. Like these are the little things that are really meaningful if you're going to prepare food.
And
Okay,
it's not
so-
just making a shopping list. It's you got to backtrack.
Yeah.
It's way more
Oh
than
my
just
gosh! Oh
setting
yeah!
a list.
Like, and I'm
Yes.
glad you said that because, like, I have 3 kids, so you have to think about what days do they have sports activities? What days is Hope going to go into the office? It's 3 days a week, but we live in Atlanta, and it's an hour and a half for her to get home sometimes. What days do I have to take my youngest kid to work? Like, these are all things that you have to figure out because that will dictate what you're cooking and when you're cooking. And what you can cook, because sometimes you just can't prepare anything because people are going in different directions, so they have to eat out. And so you have to communicate that with them in advance because they're going to get home. There might be one person that gets home expecting a meal, and like, oh, well, I guess nobody's here. So yes, you're exactly right.
Right.
Okay, so something that I want to also stress that you brought up is gatekeeping, and we should probably go back to that because that was a process I had to work through. But I want to highlight also common sense. My wife did the laundry for 20 years. I didn't know how to do the laundry. Again, if you're listening to this, you're probably judging me, thinking I'm terrible. I promise. I wasn't out boozing it up with my friends on the golf course. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week, but I didn't know how to do the laundry. So my wife had a particular way to do it. So I opened up my laptop, I got out an Excel spreadsheet, and I literally wrote down exactly what she wanted done and how she wanted to do it and taped it above the washer and dryer. That's how I do the laundry. So
no
I think
improv,
it
you just
depends.
adopted it.
Oh yeah. But you brought up maternal gatekeeping, and I think that this is especially important to talk about because I think it's misunderstood, and it creates a lot of resentment in relationships. So, like my experience with it was during the transition, and it was frustrating. We did use in part some different systems. Like I read Equal Partners for Dr. Mangino, which was really beneficial, and then I read Fair Play and employed much of that system, which is really helpful. But when any human being has been doing something for 20 years, of course they're going to have a particular way that they think it should be done, particularly if it's been done well. So it is entirely rational for any human being to gatekeep. And I think like if you're in my position and you're starting to take on more at home, when I say that, like you're as a teammate doing more than you were doing before, that you have to recognize that is rational, that would happen in the workplace, and that requires like grace and empathy when you work through it. But on the other hand, it's also important for the person who is the gatekeeper, to be respectful of the fact that there are different ways to do it, right? Like if you have a standard level of care that you both agree upon, whether that's how the house looks or the quality of the meals, whatever it may be, there should be freedom for the person who owns the task, meaning they're responsible for it as an adult. They're not waiting for their wife to tell them to go do it like an intern, but it's like, I own this task. That the partner has to recognize that they might do it in a different way, and that's okay. Or a big thing to consider, an important thing to consider, is to outsource it. Right? If you're a busy dual career couple and you have the financial means to outsource a task, go for it.
Did you come up against the scenario where, and I assume in this case it would have been your wife, but could have been you, where you can tell she's thinking, how did he get to this age and not know how to do X, Y, Z, or not know what day the garbage goes out or the recycling's picked up? I mean, that's a lot. There's a lot of resentment
That's the mental load
packed into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that over time it just grew kind of into acceptance. I don't know. Like, I think you need to remember that she saw how hard I worked. I had a bleeding ulcer before I was 40, and like she knew that I was doing everything in my power to be what we needed me to be at that time. Mm-hmm. So I've been lucky that she wasn't judgmental when it came to that. I'm really blessed. My wife's amazing.
We have talked to a number of millennials who have said that things haven't changed all that much. One of our guests said that she believed that men, once they have a family, want a 1950s housewife. And another one said that it's not that they're against it, that's not how they envision what a family should be. They just don't see themselves doing the things around the home or involved with the children. Do you really see that changing, or is it requiring more interference and education?
I think it's tough to lump everybody into one category or another. So I'll try to kind of put it into two camps. Like camp one would be men who married, some really intelligent women who are high achievers, who are ambitious. Like we went into this with our eyes wide open, right? Like you don't marry somebody who's like a physician, an attorney, a venture capitalist, and think to yourself, oh, she's gonna just stay home. Like that's not, and I'm not trying to say that just stay home is a bad thing. That it's a wonderful thing to raise your family, but I think a lot of at least in my circle, my friends, we primarily married women like that. So like we look at it a little bit more practically. Like, she's amazing in her career. So how can we kind of team up? I think like the other camp, I'll say there's three camps maybe. The other camp that I think we can reach are just the people that don't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. Like when I bring up the mental load, women know instantly. Like you can see
yes, we do.
Right away their eyes light up. Every one of them. You say the words mental load to a man, and they don't really get it. Not all the time. And it's because I think like they're just it's in most cases men just want to be great for their partners. They really do. But you're going to naturally and gradually slip into different decisions that become habits. You're going to slip into roles that are based on what you saw that become habits. And so as you slip into more and more of those, over time, what settles in is one partner that manages most of the household, the mental load of it, and the other partner has what they think is an equal contribution by completing the honey to-do list.
Right, that's helping.
That's helping, right? You don't help if you are a teammate. You don't help if you are a partner.
And you don't babysit your own children.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. Oh my goodness, I can't stand when somebody says you don't babysit your kids. Well said. I'll leave it at that. Yep.
So we had a guest recently, a military mom, and she joined the military when her husband was in active duty, and then she became in active duty, and he left, and she was still in active duty, but she kept all those responsibilities, even though she was now. And it was interesting. This is a well-educated, successful woman, and somehow she still retained the mental load and the planning. She's on reserve now, and she'd have to go away, and she did all the planning for the time where she was gone.
The lists, the phone all the time.
Food in the freezer.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's, as you're pointing out, Brian, you have to take steps to prevent that. And
Yeah.
I do like what you said about stepping up. Like, it is annoying for someone to say, well, if you asked me to do X, Y, and Z. But you're pointing out that your message, or part of it, is don't ask to be asked. Don't wait to be asked. Step up and just insert yourself. But on the same token,
Right.
your partner needs to accept that you're going to do it your way, and they have to accept it the way you're giving it. You're
Well,
not
yeah,
an
agreed.
intern
Yep,
father.
you got it.
You're the father husband. You can figure these things out.
And I actually want to give you, Brian, a shout out on the article on your website about the ultimate guide to the mental load, what you need to know for a stronger marriage, and geared to men.
Yep.
But is there anything specific you recommend, and I guess women do, to get their spouse to buy in? Because frankly, it's easier for them not to have to allocate these responsibilities.
So I'm gonna assume that your audience has been married for a little bit, because clearly, if you can start your marriage in the right way, where you have really thoughtful roles in the home that you've laid out together, that it's pretty easy to keep those going until you have a child, and then they need to be revisited because there's a reset. But if it's let's say it's an older couple who's been together for a little bit, and there are habits in place where resentment is starting to build, I think the most important thing is to have an honest, open conversation where it's scheduled. So like in the financial role, my background, my professional background's in personal finance. And in the financial world, you have what are called money dates on a regular basis. And what I've learned through my own lived experiences in the last 2.5 years and being obsessed with reading and research is that you have to have the same kind of meetings with your spouse about managing the home. And that you have to call one of those meetings, and you just have to sit down with your partner and say, I really need to talk to you. I'm stressed out. I can't handle A, B, and C, or I feel like I'm resenting you because you have more free time than me. I just want to have an equal amount of free time so I can go on a walk, so I can maybe go out with friends, whatever it may be. And if you can quantify with your partner what that looks like with the amount of time that you are taking as a woman to manage the home, that's really helpful. I love the app called Persist, because through 75 initial questions, it quantifies the amount of time that each of you are taking to manage the home. It makes it easier, I think, for when they look at the amount of hours each week that it takes to do things. It makes it easier for your husband to understand why you are coming to you with this challenge. And then when you're having the conversation, look at it as like, a team huddle, right? Like the worst time you can do it is if you're upset. That's the worst time. You have to meet at a time where emotions are running really low, so cognition can run high, and you can be sensitive to each other's kind of like resentments or fears or whatever it may be, and come together as a team to work through the issues.
So let's, though, go back for a new couple. They've been married, they have a baby, and this is a situation I hear a lot. Mom is home on maternity leave, and so she's responsible at home. She goes back to work, and somehow she's thought to be still responsible for the baby anyway.
Yeah.
And, let's tell people what they can do up front, because that tends to then continue.
CPE, I see here. Conceive,
CPE.
plan, execute. I like that.
Yeah, that's a fair play foundation. Conceive, plan, and execute. But that's not the. I don't think that that's the first step. That's an early step. I think the first step in that situation is to figure out whether or not, as a man, you have paid paternity leave and take it. Because ultimately, let me back up. Take the paid paternity leave and actually do what you should be doing and not doing any work in your career and focusing entirely on what's necessary to start your young family together. All too often, men either don't have that support from their employer, they feel like they can't use their paid paternity leave, they don't understand what it's for, and frankly, a lot of them think that women have like this magic wand where they know how to do everything after a baby's born, from changing a diaper to handling if the baby gets sick. And I remember talking to Dr. Joshua Coleman about this, like the fact that women are kind of put into position where they have to feel that way, right? Because it's a societal norm. And then men naturally, at least I was this way, like if you've watched your wife give birth, everyone will tell you, most people tell you it's a beautiful experience. I think it's absolutely terrifying.
Yes.
And I will do whatever my wife says. And so I'm honestly more on pins and needles of like what she needs. And so men, I think, need to step in there and say, okay, here's what I want to do to help you. Am I on the right track? And assume the new mental load that has now been born into your lives. You have a baby. And with that comes many, many, many more responsibilities, and the emotional load is greater. And you have to revisit, while you're on paternity leave, how to make sure that all of that new responsibility is distributed fairly.
So let's have some advice on how a man can take paternity leave when he works in an environment where you feel it's not respected. I've talked to a number of senior men, particularly in the finance world, and they're like, I don't know why this guy, I know I have to give him paternity leave, but I don't get it. And you know how they look at you like, why is this guy doing this? Take it anyway?
Yeah. So first of all, when my oldest was born, it didn't even exist. Right. I had 3 days that I could take. I had David Smith on my podcast, and he's an expert in this. And the first advice that he gave for managers is to parent out loud, including paternity leave. That if you, as a manager, have had a child, your company offers paternity leave, don't just take it, but like in your away message, make it crystal clear, like that I am focused on my child right now. Make that the expectation with the people who report to you. If where it gets tricky is that it is not, I don't know the data, but it's not broadly expected for a man to take weeks and weeks of paternity leave after the birth of a child. So it could put their career at risk. So that really is a judgment call with your spouse. Even though a company might offer it, the managers themselves might not be supportive of it. That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, we're hoping for change on this front. And with millennials, it seems that they're really being vocal about wanting to have family time. So hopefully that will kind of get the old guard feelings to erode, and we can see more of this. But if men take paternity leave, as you say, if they parent out loud, it helps.
They normalize it for everyone.
They normalize it for everyone, including women. One thing I wanted to ask about is, we've seen a lot of data about many successful women end up divorced. It's unfortunately a fact that correlates with women's success. How do you feel what your program, what you're advocating for, helps women maintain their relationships and not end up in that situation?
Well, that's a good question. So again, I don't pretend that advocating for managing money in the home as a team is like a silver bullet to every problem. But what I know from the research is that as women earn more, they actually take on more responsibility at home. That really stuck out to me. And then the other thing that stuck out to me based on the research is that when women are earning 40% of the contribution of the total household income, that a man is at his happiest. And that when women start to earn more, the same or more, men become less happy. So I think there's two things at play there.
Interesting.
It is consistent, yeah. So I think the first thing at play is when women who are earning more begin to tackle more at home. And this is, I'll share my own personal experience with this. They call it, my wife would call it like mom guilt, where their mom did most of the work at home and had the flexible career. So they're trying to do all the things that their stay-at-home mom did or their mom who had a flexible job did, and they can't. And it's because it's impossible if you're working 50, 60 hours a week. And so when they come home, they're working feverishly to do those things. And so they're working through their own inner turmoil, which again goes back to why a husband needs to intentionally say, I want to step in here, why you have to have these regular meetings and communicate as a team to work together. But I also think as far as the other research that I cited, that when women earn 40% of the total household income, men are at their happiest when they begin to earn more, men begin to get fearful. And it's because in years past, and for some today, money and masculinity are married. And a man might feel like less of a man. A man might not know how he can contribute. A man might unfairly and unknowingly believe that they are limited to only being a financial provider, failing to understand that in many cases, when women are higher income earners, that's not of interest. They might want a man who can be a financial provider, but when you look at the research, that is not number one. Number one is social and emotional support. The support that they need, the emotional support that they need to be great everywhere. And top of the list is also a teammate at home, because if they're earning a bunch of money, they don't need somebody else also earning a bunch of money. That's not what's going to bring them happiness. And so when you tackle those two things, it helps busy dual career couples who are high achievers kind of work past the challenges and the yuckiness of the progress of a new workforce that has unfortunately not been seen in the home in a way where people understand what their new world looks like in a modern marriage.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. And, kind of like a secondary to that thought, many women we've interviewed found, a second act once the children got older. And I know your children are in their late teens and early 20s, correct? So this may not apply to you, but if you're in a situation where you have a modern husband who's pulling more weight in the younger years, there's no reason why he can't find his second act when, kids are a little older and it's a little easier to juggle some of the things that were difficult when they were younger. Do you find that that's something that men can do to maybe help with that balance?
So many of our advisory board members take turns kind of leading the charge outside of the home. So I'll go back to the gardener and rose metaphor. I had been, kind of the rose, so to speak, and my wife was the gardener in our home to make sure that everything was running so I could do great in my career. And now it's my turn. Well, nothing is saying that can't go back to how it was before. And our advisory board members, many of them have this very similar relationship. So they go back and forth and back and forth. It requires, kind of ongoing communication, keeping a pulse at what is keeping everybody happy. And I think the one thing that I've learned is that just because your way right now that you're doing things in the home is working, doesn't mean that it's going to work that way in 10 years. As you said, when the home dynamics change, like when we're empty nesters, for an example, like do I need to be doing this?
Well, let me ask you, since you're what you've called, I think, the lead dad, does that relieve your wife?
That's Paul Sullivan
That's
from
Paul
the Company
Sullivan.
of Dads. Yeah, he's
I
a
thought
lead
you
dad.
used I thought you used the term too. Okay, but as a gardener,
I do.
are you responsible for
do.
kid
Lead
has to
dad.
be picked up? Is that all your responsibility? Is getting the garbage and the laundry? Is making sure they're too old for play dates, but making sure their cars are working or they're not screwing up in school? Is all of that on your plate, or does your wife take some of it, or do you on some of it?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, I love the term lead dad, and I'll gladly accept that that's one of my roles. And what that means is that I'm the primary point of contact for the school, as an example, or if there's an injury or a kid that's sick, because I have the flexible job by design. So I can do those things. And it's been a journey, by the way. Like, it is, people kind of look at you like, oh, are you sure you don't need to talk to your wife before you make this decision? Like, I'm incapable as an adult to
I just want to
sign
interrupt.
paperwork?
We had this funny thing happen the other week. I had gotten the roofer. We needed some work done, and they called to talk about it. And my husband, I wasn't home. My husband answered the phone, and she said, "Well, is it okay if I talk to you?" To him.
It is so, which is kind of, it's funny, but it's also like really telling of how much women just naturally take on, right? So yes, I am also the lead dad at home that takes on those things. Now, there are certain tasks that my wife owns. I am, from a financial perspective, I am what's called a tightwad. So it actually, in many cases, pains me to spend money. So she will, even though I manage the money, she is the one who takes on, like, we have a leak in the pool. And she knows that that's going to drive me absolutely bananas. And so she has handled that. Why? Because it's going to be expensive. We have a second floor laundry that flooded. And I handled all of the work, the claims, blah, 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 all of those things. But when it came to actually looking at the cost, she was the one who I handed the paperwork to, because I knew my head would have exploded. But there are also other things that she handles. She handles health care for one of my children, my youngest child. That just goes back to a story, like, my upbringing. My mom was really sick growing up, and I grew up hearing her fight with insurance companies so she would be covered. So it's not uncommon for people in my situation who are lead dads to handle all of it, but I don't handle all of it. I handle most of it.
So, I want to just talk a little about this lead parent thing, because can there be co-leads, or do you really have to have one person in charge? Because we've talked about, lead moms and lead dads, and where one seems to be more responsible, the person with more flexibility. But in a lot of situations, you got the parents having, equally demanding careers and situations. Why doesn't work as well? It's just what I keep hearing. Or does it?
Well, I'll start with just, if there's a lead dad, like in my circumstance, I want to be clear that doesn't mean my wife's not an incredible mother. She's providing the social, emotional learning support. She's there for them. What really that is referencing is, kind of like the logistics of when the kids have work and school paperwork and college applications, et cetera. In my opinion, it's a little bit easier just to have one point person that can then say, I need help with A, B, and C, than to have co-parents. But that's not to say co-parenting doesn't work. And it's only because with kids, like, things are always changing. Like, there's like, what if soccer practice is canceled? What if they move it to a different facility? What if your kid is failing a class and you have to ground them and now you have to take them in early to get remediation? So because of those moving parts, I find it's a little bit easier to have one lead person. But if you're going to co-parent, I feel like that we had a pretty good system when I was working all the time. It starts with the rule number one, that you always get each other's back. So the default answer is no when the kid asks for something. And then if your partner says, this is the way it's going to be to your kids, that you get your partner's back. But after that, the way we broke it up was that I handled anything related to sports and activities and school, and then she handled everything else. So we had very specific tasks and ownership within everything that it took to kind of to be a co-parent.
And some of what you're talking about here, just by nature of the use of the word modern, you bring up sports. It's infuriating and almost impossible to make a schedule with those things. Oh, you get rain. This field is closed. We have to go to a different field.
Yeah.
No, sorry, that's busy. We're going to get to a different one. It means a terrible email chain. And it does seem like a waste of resources at times when both of you are getting it and you're both reading it. But that is an aspect of modern parenting that is different than when our parents parented and you could ride your bike to whatever it was. It was once a week.
Yep.
If it rained, it wasn't held. I mean, now there's a lot more requirements for modern parents, which makes the whole thing a lot more difficult.
Oh, it's brutal. My middle kid was in the National League at one point, so we'd have league games in Charlotte in one weekend and Birmingham the next weekend and Nashville the next league. Those are league games. So yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was a hockey parent, so don't even
Oh,
okay.
Got it. Yeah.
So I really want to talk money with you because, you are an expert in money, and money is a big thing in relationships and in families. Yeah. So talk to us about money and wealth management for couples, like goals, being on the same page. What if you have completely different upbringings or views of money? How do you work that out?
Oh my gosh. Many books have been written to answer just that one single question. So I want to start it with just a simple exercise for couples who perhaps want to find a more productive way or a less stressful way to manage money together. And that is that to schedule regular household meetings, and as a part of that, you would have a money date. Ideally, if you're just married or if you're trying to create a new system, that they're weekly. They're at a time when your emotions are really low, so your cognition is high, and you're able to look at the bigger picture first. So my favorite exercise is if one of you brings a lottery ticket to the meeting, and so you are physically holding this $2 lottery ticket. And you just ask your partner, okay, so if we won the lottery, what would we do? How would we use the money? And you start having conversations about how you would spend your time differently. Where would you live? Would you continue to work? Do you envision yourself, maybe outsourcing certain tasks that you're doing yourself? And obviously you're not going to win. I guess somebody's got to win the lottery, but statistically speaking, you're not. But what you are doing is that you are really talking about the dream of how you want to live. And that can lead to opening your eyes to different types of possibilities. So if ultimately you've stumbled across, let's say, for example, the fact that you would rather spend more money by hiring a housekeeper than buying a nicer car so you can have more time with one another, you can revisit that in your budget. If you would rather, if you don't really care about how big your house is, because you realize, I would just live here if I won, $5 million, but you would take more vacations, perhaps that you've stumbled upon the fact that what we know through research is that experiences make us far happier than possessions. And so it can lead to productive conversations about how we manage money. And then what's most important about that exercise is it leads to establishing shared financial goals. A goal or two that is crystal clear, where you understand what you're working toward, and a goal or two that really is telling you and your partner what you're trying to do and how you're trying to live your life together. Because that's ultimately what money conversations are. Money's just a tool. That's all you're using it. It's a tool to unlock your dreams, or it's a tool that you can turn on yourself to stub your toe if you misuse it. But it's ultimately a tool. What you really are talking about when you're talking about money is how do you want to live your life with your partner.
I just have to add one thing here. That is a really amazing exercise, because one of our early arguments when we played the lottery was that I always hit 26 payments and my husband hit lump sum. And he said, why would you do that? You'd want all the money up front. And I said, no, we would just want it over time so we could just spend it little by little. I swear.
That's really funny.
I know, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It wasn't really an argument. It was just one of those, early conversations that you realize that you do see things differently. You do have different goals. And I think it's a great exercise.
And perhaps it should happen before you get married.
If I could add something, and I'm curious here, are you a little bit more risk averse than your husband when it comes to money?
I can't even answer it that way because we've been married so long, and I'm really proud of what we've done together. So how we were initially, we each have taken cues from each other. We've put 3 kids through college. We've got money in the bank to do the last one. We are shoulder to shoulder, so proud of that, and we built it ourselves. But if you'd asked me that question 20 years ago, it would have been a different conversation. But we've come so far having these conversations, looking at budgets. It's not easy. It took us a while to get a joint bank account, to be honest. And also being upfront about expenses, like you mentioned, cleaning woman. I remember John Tesh, the performer, had on his radio show what one expense you could spend that universally makes you happier, and it was cleaning woman. And that I got my husband to understand that money was mandatory for us to be happy, being both of us working. Once he got over that, now he's like, oh, when's the cleaning woman coming? It was really helpful to us as a couple. But so I can't answer it the way you're asking right now, but it was part of our process, and it's a really good exercise.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and if I could add, the reason I asked that is that could be something where if I'm talking to my wife about it and she says that, my next question would be, is what sounds to me like you just feel a little bit more secure knowing I'm going to have these payments over time. And so what that could really mean is that she is prioritizing like security, and I'm somebody who that's not as important to me. And so I need to be empathetic toward her, knowing like if she needs to feel safe, if she needs that security, that needs to be reflected in the budget we build together.
Now that's so interesting because I looked at it completely differently for that particular example, because my husband's a finance guy and he thinks he can invest it better than the government.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
No, I mean, that is the pure answer.
He got it half right, because I did need the security, but my husband was thinking exactly like Maura's husband, like I could do better than them.
And I trust my husband that way
Me too.
So,
that's exactly right. Yes.
And we all win the lottery. There's a discussion about hiding money, and people think that it's women hiding their shoe purchases or bag purchases, but I heard on sports radio, yes, all our car radios are set to the sports radio, about a guy who's called in because he bought Yankees World Series tickets without telling his wife, and they're a fortune right now.
Right.
And he put it on PayPal because it won't come in until later. So the series will be over by the time she finds out. And I'm sure you have a view about this, Brian.
Yeah, I do. That guy's going to be sleeping on the couch for a really long time.
But maybe not if the Yankees win.
I hope he thinks it's worth it. So there's a couple perspectives. Like the first, and I think the easiest, is to assume that the person who is committing what's called financial infidelity, that they're being deceptive about their own personal financial situation. So in this case, it's they're hiding a pretty big expense. That's always the fault of the person who's committing the offense, right? So the husband who bought the Yankees tickets, and the problem with that, doing that obviously is now you've betrayed your spouse. Like that's why it's called financial infidelity. And so there could be trust issues that come from that. There could be all kinds of problems that come from that, particularly if their budget is really tight. But the other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes people commit financial infidelity because the other partner is just completely unwilling to be flexible.
Right.
That they have no interest in working together to manage money, that they think it's their way or the highway. And naturally, when that occurs, you're going to find ways to start to spend money in a way that brings you joy. So I don't want people to not to throw, I'm going to throw the husband under the bus at first. I would never do that. That's really wrong. But maybe she's really strict, and maybe this is a dream of his. Maybe since he was a child, like going back to his childhood, maybe his father and his mother was a big Yankees fan, and that they've always talked about this, and it's something he's always wanted to do, and he has the money to do it, and he knows that even though he has the money to do it, his wife won't let him do it. So he's just decided, I don't care. This is really important for my life, and I'm going to do it. So that's another way to look at it, is that couples need to have some give and take and really listen and learn from one another's desires when they're working together to manage money in their relationship.
And some burn money. That has to be in the budget, that both sides have burn money.
So joint accounts or separate accounts?
Well, I would just say the problem with that is when you're in a phase when money's really tight, or you have circumstances that money's tight, there can be resentment over anyone having burn money. And sometimes maybe when the wife is, oftentimes it's the wife, but not always, is stay at home, she may not feel like she has burned money because she's not bringing in, so she can't spend. And I've shared this with Maura.
Ooh, that's bad.
It is bad, but I have heard women say it. And one woman told me a story that she would buy $100 gift cards every time she went to the supermarket, because then she could amass them and buy what she really wanted, to hide it the way that we're talking about the PayPal. Look, none of this is good. This is all about communication. Right. This is all about sitting and making sure everyone's heard and feeling comfortable, and talking about long-term goals and saying, all right, it's going to hurt right now, but this isn't going to be like this in 10 years because we're going to be in a different spot once we achieve those goals.
So another part of the money conversation is wealth and building wealth. And it's not, it seems that women often are in charge of paying the weekly, monthly bills, and men are in charge of the investing.
Yeah.
Tell us if that is in fact what you see, why, and how to change that.
According to Pew, you're right on. That men predominantly do this, quote, saving and investing, and that women handle the day-to-day. So I think I'm going to make some assumptions here. Is like the first assumption is that because women are predominantly the ones who take the lead in the home, they're the ones who are actually required to spend the money because it costs money to manage a home. So it's far easier to slip into that norm. I find it to be an unfortunate reality in marriages, because like you're married to finance guys, right? They're in the world of finance. And it's interesting you brought up the lottery. Like, I would take the lump sum too, because I know I could put it in the index fund and outperform, whatever the gradual payments are going to be. But like you can, I'm sure your husbands will tell you, investing for retirement is not something that requires daily attention. If it does, you're literally doing it wrong. Like, it's something that you should put on auto pay or auto deposit. Right. It should be in index funds. You should hire somebody that's an expert to manage it. Same thing with saving. Saving should be automatic.
So are you saying it's actually less work and the women are doing the things that require constant management?
Absolutely. And that's across the board. That's with money. That's with chores. Like, a lot of times, guys will mow the lawn. Well, that's a weekly thing that you can do on a lawnmower, drinking beer, where women are the ones who predominantly do the laundry, which is what you're constantly doing, or doing the dishes, which is what you're constantly doing. And managing money, other than saving and investing, is a daily grind. And I have to stress to people that has to be a consideration when you're dividing up your tasks. And when and I want to make this point really clear, when you're dividing up what it takes to manage the home, I'm a strong believer that each partner should have equal leisure time. Equal leisure time, equal time to go and do their own thing. That is the easiest way to divide things up fairly, because it is never going to be 50-50. That's hogwash. It's impossible. What needs to be 50-50 is equal time. And that includes, I spend probably 2 hours a week managing our money. Like, I have a tiller, I have a budget, a spreadsheet where I look at everything. Yes, it causes some pain, but I go through everything. I make sure that all the money in our accounts makes sense. You're going to think I'm nuts. I pay my credit card balances, all of them in full daily, because that boosts my credit score. That's how I earned a perfect credit score. Like, these are all the things that, require ongoing attention. But then when we have money dates, I come with the receipts, so to speak. We have the spreadsheet that shows where everything goes. So there's no lying about money. It's complete transparency, and it makes it easier to have conversations about money. Because when we're talking about money, my wife and I, we're talking big picture, right? We're talking about, how do we want the money controlled? That is a joint decision. And it's never mattered in our marriage who the breadwinner is. That's something that we arrive at together. How the money is managed, that's the actual task itself. That's what I tackle.
Well, I'll just add one thing here. In fairness, I would say it's my little informal research that I have seen women not really look at the long-term goals. That has changed. I mean, I used to do real estate closings, and I see more women coming in and handling the mortgage, where another time that wasn't the case. But here's the message. You have to look at that. And one thing Maura and I talked about, I started an investment fund when I was a young lawyer with my female work partner. She taught me how to set it up. I used the same guy she used. And at one point, I showed her my account, and she just hugged me and said, "I'm so proud of you that you put that away." And Maura and I talk about that, like having your own little account, that you did that you have your 401k. Women should be aware of that. They should celebrate that. That is a huge achievement. And it's something that we need to be impressing upon them to do that for themselves, because that's what they need when they're in retirement.
If you don't mind, I have to add an important fact. Research came out 2 years ago that 1 in 4 married couples were together, investing enough for them both to be getting the full employer match, but they were not. Meaning, one partner was investing more than was needed to get the employer match, which I think is great. But the other partner was underinvesting, not earning the employer match, the full employer match, because they didn't have enough money if they had, if she took more out. So on average, this will cost couples $25,000 over 30 years. This is what they found. But that doesn't include investment returns.
Right.
So you know how compounding works.
Compounded.
So literally, people just have not had a 5-minute conversation, 90-second conversation. Hey, honey, are you getting the full employer match? Just that one
It's probably
question.
$1 million, 25 compounded over, so many years. But, Brian, we got to ask you our question.
Right.
Okay? Can you have it all and all at the same time?
Well, how you define all?
That's what we're
That's for
asking
you. What's all to you?
All to me is a happy family. And I know my family needs to be happy also when I'm happy. And I think that if you have the blessing of being able to earn enough money, you can. Where my heart breaks is when I see so many really busy dual career couples who they don't have the earning capacity to be able to have it all. And I feel for them. It's hard. But if you have the means, you can have it all. And if you live below your means, you can have it all. Because I would never define having it all as a really nice car or a super big house. I look at it as smiles on the faces of my family members.
That's really funny, because not a single person we've talked to ever talked about having it all as being stuff.
Right.
Women don't, none of the women we spoke, or the men, ever talked about it, having it all, including stuff. It was a bigger...
Yeah, but you gave
discussion.
one of the more unique answers,
Yes.
and we thank you so much. This has been a great discussion.
I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, because we have more that we would love to cover. This was really fun.
And you gave a lot of insights, and you know what? You're doing a public service. Thank you.
This means very much. Thank you. It was an honor to be on.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Please follow us, listen to us, and rate us on our platforms, Spotify, Apple, and our website, thebalanceddilemma.com, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and email us your suggestions. There's no cost, but it means a lot to us.